Hello everyone. So last time we came to you guys here, we were talking about one thing that was very near and dear to our hearts, that was champagne. Well, the one thing that goes well with champagne, or not champagne, but drinking, is food. So that's our other big love language here in the Keys household. For those of you who don't know me that well, I actually did go to culinary school for a brief stint before moving to Paris. Not because I wanted to be a chef or anything, but because us and our circle of friends absolutely love cooking and eating and drinking together. So I figured if we're going to do this, why not take it up to the next level? As Cheyenne says, I'm an all-in kind of person. Whenever I put my mind to something or decide I want to do something, I literally go all in. And school is it for this. So we're going to talk about duck à l'orange today, or duck with orange sauce. I'm not sure if this would be officially à l'orange sauce because it's going to be very basic, but this is so easy for you to make at home. Literally, if you can pan sear a chicken breast, a pork chop, pork tenderloin, you can make this dish in about 30 minutes, okay? We are not going live just because of the time that it takes in between searing and rendering fat out and everything, so we didn't want to bore you for 30 minutes. But we'll be cutting in and out and just clipping the video together, all right? So we're gonna start off with first is the duck breast. Here in France, we're very lucky in that duck breast is about as common as chicken breast is back home. So if you go to the grocery store, a regular average duck breast might cost you €5. The cheaper ones are going to be a little tougher, a little gamier, not as tender. This one we bought from our local butcher, and this was €10 a piece. This will definitely be enough to feed both of us once we slice it up. So first thing you want to do is when you get it out, just like any meat, you're going to make sure that you pat it nice and dry. Water is the enemy of searing and browning, or the Maillard reaction as it's called. This one is actually already fully prepped for us because I bought two, and we did one of them the other night for our anniversary dinner, and we decided that we could not eat both of them together. So normally this would come without the scoring of the fat and everything. It would just be one big thing. If your butcher doesn't trim it up for you, you're going to want a fillet knife. There's going to be fat hanging over the edge here. You just want to trim that up on all sides. You don't want to take it in too close because this is all going to shrink up, right? So if this were cut even closer, it would shrink up and all the meat would be exposed. Now, you see how the meat or the fat's very soft and moving around right now? That would make it very hard to do this scoring, especially if your knife isn't very sharp. So if that's the case, if the fat just isn't this thick, or if it's just the duck breast has come up a little in temperature, then throw it in the freezer for like 10 minutes. That'll firm the fat up, and then you can go ahead and do these scores. When you do the scores, you see how it's like not all the way to the skin. Here it's a little bit closer, but the butcher did this. So you don't want to go all the way to the actual meat. You just want to stay right through here. This is going to do two things. One, it's aesthetics. So once it's all cooked, it's going to be very nice and pretty. But more importantly, it functions to give all the fat basically a channel to drain out and render out whenever you're cooking in the pan. So you see how thick this fat is? This is going to get probably reduced down to half of that. Okay? So once you've done that, you will salt and pepper it on both sides. As my culinary instructor said to us, why do you salt and pepper both sides? Because I'm going to eat both sides. That's why. And when you are salting things, the chefs on TV, they don't do this just to look fancy or anything, but you want to take it from a high position and sprinkle. The reason is when you're going from a high spot, it allows the salt to spread out and be evenly distributed. If you were to just do it from here, see how it all puddles up, whereas if you go a lot higher, it's going to spread out. So it's not just about being fancy, it actually functions for something, okay? So I've done both sides already. We've got everything scored. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is mise en place. That is not just used in French, it's used in culinary settings around the world, but it is French. It basically means everything in its place. So if you pan down here, you will see this is my mise en place. For mise en place, you want to read through your entire menu, or not menu, your recipe from start to finish. Look at all the ingredients, look at all the steps, and see what's going to happen. Because one of the steps down below in the recipe might say set the oven to 400 degrees. If you wait till the end for that, well, you're going to have to wait for the oven to come up. So what we have here is the white wine vinegar, the sugar, stock, butter, and orange. So this is all going to be made or going to be used to make our sauce. And I actually put it in, when I'm doing my mise en place at home, I put things in the order that I'm going to use them. So that way when it says add this to the pot, add this, everything is pretty much in the order that it needs to be. All right, so we're going to start cooking this. I highly recommend a cast iron pan for the duck breast. One, because it holds the heat and distributes it so much better. If you don't have a cast iron pan, I would then just go with a regular stainless steel. Do not use non-stick. If you use non-stick, you're not going to get the fond, you know, that kind of burnt crusty stuff that sticks to the pan. That is what becomes the foundation of your sauce. So if you just use a non-stick pan, you're not going to have any of that, okay? So you always want to start in a cold pan with the duck breast because it's got so much fat. It's going to render out and you're going to have so much fat that you're going to pour it off. We'll talk about what to do with that stuff later. So we'll just set it fat side down. We're going to turn it to a medium heat. Medium heat is just going to let the fat render out nice and slowly. If you go too high, it's going to render out super fast and just burn, and it's not going to be good. Most duck breasts that are average thickness, you don't have to put them in the oven to finish. Some recipes will say put your oven on 325 or 400 and then finish it off in the oven. My experience, almost every time I've done duck breast, you can do it on one side with the skin, render all the fat out, get it nice and golden brown, turn it over, and then finish it on that side, and it's perfectly fine. What you do want to have is maybe just your oven on a low or warm setting, so when you take it out and it's done, you can just put it in there while you make the sauce and it stays at a good temperature. Okay, so we're going to let this render some fat out. We'll come back and show you just how much fat gets rendered out here, and then we'll talk about what to do with that. All right, so stay tuned. All right, so it's been maybe 5 minutes or so. If you zoom into the pan, see it's starting to look nice and pretty, but it's not quite golden brown enough. But I have not drained the fat once yet, and watch how much has rendered out. It's quite a bit of duck fat there, as many chefs refer to it as liquid gold, basically. So you see it's got, you know, little impurities and stuff in there. If you have a fine mesh strainer, which I have somewhere, something like this, then whenever you're done, you can just strain it through there, put it in the fridge for maybe 1 or 2 months. You can put it in the freezer for even longer. A lot of people back home in Louisiana will use the duck fat to make their roux, especially if they're doing a duck and andouille gumbo. And one of the things I like to do with it is duck fat roasted potatoes, right? So instead of using butter or oil, use the duck fat and roast your potatoes in there. Nice little side dish, right? So it's still not quite there yet. It's been on 5 for my range the entire time so far. And we'll just keep doing that, because if it just sits in the fat, it's not going to render out quite as easily, or it's just going to get soggy, right? So every now and then I'll tilt it just to see if it's starting to pull up. If it is, I'll drain it out, and then we'll be good to go. All right, so we'll check back in a little while, and then we'll get the sauce prepped. All right, so we're just about time to flip it over. So, not sure how good the light is there, but golden brown, as one of my favorite culinary instructors always said, GBMD, golden brown means delicious. You can also see just how thin the fat has rendered down to, right? So now we just turn it over, and we're gonna let it go until it hits about 125. Medium rare is where duck really should be served, otherwise it's just gonna get really tough and chewy. If my memory serves me correctly, medium rare for duck is 135. Since we're gonna be doing a pan sauce and everything, and the temperature is gonna continue to come up, I will pull it when it's about 125 and then just let it slowly rise up while it's warming. If you have yourself a good little meat thermometer here, this is what we use. If you go on Amazon, CDN thermometer, this should come up. The nice thing about it is, you see how thin the needle gets there, so when you do pierce the meat, you're not gouging a big old hole and letting all the juices come out. And it registers super quickly. So I will start putting it in through here in the fattest part whenever I think it's almost done. It's been a while since I've done duck breast, except for the other night, of course. But I want to say it's maybe usually another 10 minutes or so to get up to that point. So we've got everything ready for our sauce, but you can see I already attacked this orange from the last duck that we did 2 nights ago. Anytime you're using citrus in a dish, if it's going to be in a vinaigrette, if it's going to be in quinoa or pasta or something, one of my very good friends who went to the Culinary Institute of America, Melissa Samuels, many of you in New Orleans know her from Melissa's Fine Pastries, she taught me just how much more vibrant the taste and aroma is from the actual peel and the zest versus the juice. So if you want to test yourself, when you cut the orange or lemon or lime, smell the fruit, then take your fingernail and scrape up the zest and smell that. The aroma is probably 3 to 5 times more intense. So we're going to use that. So you get your zester, and don't move the zester, move the fruit. Keep the zester in place like that, and just work it around. I'm going to try to hit the spots that are left on this. Tap, and finger down, and voila. And we'll use the rest of this for the actual juicing after. So this requires about 2 tablespoons of stock. You might ask, well, what am I gonna, like, where am I gonna get 2 tablespoons of stock when back home it usually comes in the quart-sized container? Well, you've probably heard people that make stock at home, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll get the little ice cube trays and fill one of those with stock and then put the rest in little pint or quart-sized containers. So when you're making just a simple pan sauce and you only need about 2 tablespoons, pull out one of those ice cubes. Generally that's right at about 2 tablespoons, okay? And I want to say it's 1 tablespoon of the white wine vinegar, about 1.5 tablespoons or 2 tablespoons of sugar, and then the cold butter, which is for the Monte au beurre, not beer. That's to finish the sauce, and we'll talk about that when it comes time to as well. All right, we'll be back in a little bit. So we just hit about 118, 120, and it's starting to come up pretty quickly, so I'm going to take it off, just because with the video it might take a little bit longer to do the sauce. I have these little things that I always just put my protein on, and we'll just set that in the oven. It's on more. If you're using cast iron, it's going to stay hot for quite a while, so I usually turn the heat all the way off or just turn it down to 1 or 2. You want to drain all this fat out the pan. You want a little bit of fat in there, but you're going to add some butter, but it's got plenty of fat in there for us. Okay, so when you're usually making a pan sauce, if you've been sauteing something that was a very high heat, I usually give it a couple minutes to like cool down real quick. The few things. First, I don't have thyme with me. Thyme would normally be put into this. And then, what else was I gonna say? You could use wine, you could use shallots also. If you were using shallots, you would throw the shallots in, stir it around with the wine, with the fat and the butter. Then you would pour a little bit of wine in, that would deglaze it, so that'd break all that little burnt stuff up, create some flavor. You cook that down until the wine just about evaporates. Then you'd add everything else. So the sugar, the stock, the orange juice, the zest, and then you cook that down. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna toss in 2 tablespoons of butter. And we don't need this guy right now. So that's probably pretty close. All right, I can tell that it's actually not very hot, so I'm going to put it back on the heat. Get this butter going around here. So this vinegar will help deglaze the pan a little bit. So you see all that bubbling? That's everything coming up from the bottom of the pan. Scrape all that up, that's going to contribute to the flavor. All right, sugar. It's almost like you're making a gastrique. Get that all incorporated, stir in the stock. All right. And then our orange juice, being sure to catch any seeds. I think the recipe maybe called for half a cup or something like that. So that should be good there. And then of course our zest. Right. So, and now we're just gonna let that simmer and bubble, and it's gonna cook down. As it's cooking down, which basically just means evaporating and getting more concentrated, it's gonna become a little bit thicker because of the sugar. It's gonna start to form a little bit glaze. And when it gets down to about maybe, I don't know, 3 to 4 tablespoons, which is plenty to sauce this one duck, that's when we'll go ahead and do the butter and get ready to plate up and all that fun stuff. So we'll check real quick on this guy, show you where he is right now. So that's where he is. And we will go. So yeah, I pulled it out at 118. It's already up to 134.9, 136. So this might actually be a touch more than medium rare than what we like, but it shouldn't be too bad. So I'm going to turn the oven off to make sure it doesn't add any heat. And you can see this cooking down. So this is going to take a little while to reduce. We'll come back in a few minutes and talk about that. Okay, real quick, this is already reduced by at least a quarter, but I wanted to show how much is in the pan to start. It might have been reduced by half already. So that's how much is in there to get, yeah, it's definitely reduced by half. So I just wanted you to see that to get an idea of how much is left in the pan, the finished product, once it's time, which is going to be very soon. Another thing is taste as you go. So this is really hot. Obviously you want to blow on it before sipping it. Every now and then you might want to taste it, see if it needs a little bit more orange, if it needs a little bit more salt or anything, and then it'll be ready in just a few minutes. Okay, we're just about getting there, and here comes another French culinary term for you, nappe. Nappe basically means it's used for sauces, and it's to coat the back of a spoon. So when you coat it, you do a line, and it doesn't close off, and that means the sauce is nappe, and that's about good to go. So you see how much thicker this is now? So now we're going to do the monté à beurre. The most important part for melting the butter is the butter has to be cold. So you turn the heat off. Take it off there. We've got our cold pat of butter. And what this is going to do is it's going to thicken the sauce a bit, and it's going to give it a nice gloss or sheen. And you just kind of swirl it in nice and gently, right? Add a little bit of richness to the sauce. And that is it. Because this is such a thick, glazy sauce, use the back of the spoon, push it all to one side, kind of incorporate that butter a little bit. And now it's almost, I have been just putting something under the pan, keep it all angled right there so that way it doesn't cook out. So now it's time to plate up. So we're gonna go ahead and cut it on a bias like this, presentation. So yeah, it's a little overcooked. I wouldn't say overcooked, but it should be much more pink than that. But that's why I'm a photographer, not a chef. And these little end pieces are what I like to call chef's taps. Oh, one thing I forgot, because it really didn't happen too much on this one, is if this pan over here would have been full of juices, I'd have poured that in towards the end of the sauce and added that to the flavor. So now that is all there, take your spoon, and in between, do one of them little, yeah, Yeah, well, not so fancy, but I guarantee you it tastes better than it looks. We would come back and clean the plate, wipe up all of that stuff. Anyway, I'm hungry. I want to eat. And it's 2 minutes away from our 8 p.m. clap for first responders here in Paris. So hopefully you try this. You can put comments and questions down there and we'll answer them all. But bon appetit, bonne dégustation.